Hopefully there's nobody out there saying, where's the link? We'll get started in a few more minutes. We're waiting for more folks to come on in, especially those folks that are remote and virtual. We do have folks here in the audience. They are waiting anxiously with hands in their laps and cookies in their laps too, I guess, if you have your cookies. They're not allowed to have the cookies in the hall, but that's all right. Yeah. That's good. So please hold on for a few more minutes. We're still streaming. All right. I think I'm just going to start and as people join in. They join in, we'll admit them. Hey, good evening, folks. We're about to get started. My name is Lee Altadonna. I'm president of the Wyncote Audubon Society. This is our first meeting of the 23-24 season here in the lovely Upper Dublin Public Library. And we're glad to be streaming across the state to many of our Audubon chapters and also to the bird towns that may find that they will want to get involved with the Breeding Bird Atlas as well. The meeting is being recorded. We'll make it available on the Wyncote website and if possible on the Pennsylvania Audubon Council website because we're really anxious to see people get involved with the third Pennsylvania Breeding Bird Atlas. I do want to introduce our speaker. I am going to say that to make sure you stay muted and then if you have questions to put them in the chat. We will answer the questions at the end of the presentation, and pleased to do that. I am very pleased to introduce Amber Whewell. She grew up in Missouri, where she first really fell in love with birds in the Ozarks. She received her bachelor's degree from the University of Missouri. She spent time chasing birds and other wildlife in Missouri, California, Puerto Rico, and West Africa. She then studied the Puerto Rican bullfinches while earning a master's degree from Iowa State University and went on to work as a research wildlife biologist at the USGS. I think she had advised me that she worked a lot at Patuxent. Amphibian Research and Monitoring Initiative and at Pennsylvania State University, Amber enjoys birding with her family and participating in community science, including breeding bird surveys and Christmas bird counts. She is excited to serve as the coordinator for Pennsylvania's Breeding Bird Atlas and work with the Atlas volunteers across the state and across each region. We're happy that this is, I think, only her second presentation. She's been, I guess, 2 months with this work. She is based at Hawk Mountain and State College, and she's coordinating this work. It's a 5-year effort. And again, very happy for Amber to tell us about the Breeding Bird Atlas and how we can all become involved. Amber?
All right. Thank you for that introduction, Lee. Thanks everyone who is joining in person tonight and everyone joining virtually. I'm really excited to be here to talk, as Lee said, about the upcoming bird atlas that we're doing in Pennsylvania. This will be our third atlas, and we're starting early next year, 2024. So how many people in the room here tonight have participated in an atlas before? Previous atlas in Pennsylvania? Anyone in Maryland or New York or anywhere? All right, just a couple people. Okay, so I think I have a lot of good information tonight to tell you about, kind of get you up to speed with what atlases even are. And then kind of, we'll talk about the second atlas in Pennsylvania, kind of some of the things that we learned from that, kind of the cool things that we saw. And then I'll get into our third atlas coming up and some of the new things that we have planned that I think are really exciting. Okay, so to start, what is a bird atlas anyway? So some of you may have, probably not very many, but a few of you may have road atlases in your car. An atlas is just a collection of maps, right? So a bird atlas is a collection of maps that show us where birds are. Breeding bird atlases specifically, we want to look at on a really fine scale in a given location in a given time and look at exactly where those species are breeding. So you can see this map of Pennsylvania. It's divided into this really fine grid. These are called blocks. There are almost 5,000 blocks across the state. This is the unit, the block is the unit by which we do our surveys for the atlas and how we kind of measure our progress in the atlas. So you'll hear me talk about blocks throughout this talk tonight. And so we're just basically inventorying where birds are in our space, Pennsylvania, and over a defined time, which for us will be the 5 years that this atlas takes place. And if you repeat these atlases over time, then you can start looking at trends. So you can see, are species increasing? Are they decreasing? Where are their ranges changing? That's really important information. That helps us get at what species aren't doing well or at-risk species. And then we can start identifying these important areas, maybe habitats that are harboring a lot of species, or maybe where some of these at-risk species are located. Maybe we want to try to protect those areas. And I think most importantly, a bird atlas is citizen science or community science. So look at across the whole state, all these blocks that we need to survey. There's no way that this is possible without volunteer birders participating, giving of their time and using their excellent birding skills to help us do this. And I think we're in a really great time to do this now, the age of social media. We're so well connected. So it's the perfect time to be able to participate in this and see what birders are doing and what they're seeing across the whole state. So it's really fun. The idea of bird atlases was developed in the UK. And on the left here, you can see this first atlas was published in 1970. The idea spread to the US. Maryland conducted a couple county-wide atlases. And then the first statewide atlas was done by Vermont. And they published that in 1985. As soon as Vermont started doing their atlas, other states quickly followed suit, including Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania's first 2 breeding bird atlases occurred, the fieldwork occurred in the 1980s and the early 2000s. And then those books were published in 1992, 2012. Lee kindly brought those 2 atlases here tonight. So people in the room tonight, if you haven't looked at them before, I highly encourage you to come look at them afterwards. Everyone who's joining virtually, if you haven't looked at them, I encourage you to try to find them at a library or wherever. They're really cool books. There's an account for all the species, and you can see maps and read some nice information about them. All right, so I want to get just a little bit more into how you actually conduct a breeding bird atlas. I don't want to get too into the weeds tonight because it's a lot of information and I have a lot of other things I need to cover as well tonight, but these are the basics just so you kind of understand what we're talking about when we talk about doing the breeding atlas. So it's a little bit different from just going out and birding. When you go out and just do regular birding, you're often just recording a checklist of birds that you see or hear. Sometimes you're just kind of moving along. You may or may not have much time to stop and really look at things more closely. Well, that stopping and slowing down and looking more closely is exactly what we want to do during the breeding atlas, because, you know, ideally we would just go out there and know who's breeding and where they're breeding, but that's not how it works with birds. They're secretive, they need to hide their nests. So sometimes we can find really clear evidence that they're breeding, but more often we have to use some of their other behaviors to kind of figure out the probability of if they're breeding there or not. And if they're not, maybe they're just a bird passing through or just not breeding. And so we have sort of these 4 levels of breeding status. The top 2, confirmed and probable, those are our stronger statuses. Those are stronger evidence that they're breeding. The bottom 2, possible and observed, those are either no evidence or very little evidence that they could be breeding there. And so we use these are examples in italics of sort of behaviors that we use. So let's start at the bottom, number 4. Say you just see maybe a Canada goose that's foraging in a cornfield, or some other bird. There's just not really any clear evidence that it's doing any sort of breeding activity. So that would just be an observation. We'll have lots of these during the atlas, because you go out there and you'll see a lot of things like that you don't see any more evidence, and that's okay. You can still record those. That's still useful information. That's just not telling us in that moment that species is breeding there, or that bird is breeding there. So moving up, maybe the bird is in the correct habitat where it breeds in, it's singing, so this would be possible. And then moving even further up to probable, maybe we see a pair, a male and female, they're in the correct habitat. This is higher evidence. And then finally confirmed, that's really like the gold standard. That's what we want to detect as much as possible. So this is when you actually observe a nest, you see an adult feeding young. And the way that the atlas works is you go out to these blocks where you're birding, and you'll get species in these different categories, and then over time you can upgrade species. So maybe you get a chickadee singing. That's really all you can detect. So at that moment, it will be a possible breeder. Next time you go out, maybe you can go watch those chickadees again and get some more evidence. It can be upgraded over time to probable or confirmed. And we will have lots and lots of information available on how to figure out how to know how to use these codes correctly and how that will work. We'll have a handbook that details it really well. We'll have videos, and we hope to have lots of in-person birding events or talks that go more in depth on all of this. So don't feel overwhelmed and don't feel like you need to memorize anything at this time. So now that you understand a little bit more about the atlas, let's take a step back and talk about at that time what was called PBBA2, Pennsylvania Breeding Bird Atlas 2. The fieldwork took place from 2004 to 2009, and as I mentioned, the book was published in 2012. And this atlas was a great success. We covered the whole state. Every single block was visited and had data collected from it. Over 2,000 volunteers participated. They made over 1.5 million observations, documented 190 nesting species. And a really key innovation from the second atlas was using point counts. So the first atlas in Pennsylvania and all first generation atlases focused on distribution of birds. So just where are birds located across the state. Over time, we've come to understand the value of getting abundance data as well. So not just where birds are located, but how many of them there are. Well, you need to do some extra methods for determining that. So point counts are just a survey where you stand in one spot at a point and you record all the birds that you detect in an area around you. So if you do a BBS route or know about BBS routes, those are point counts. And so in the second atlas, trained surveyors conducted over 34,000 of these point counts across the state. They were roadside surveys, so they drove along roads. And with this data, they were able to estimate abundance for 115 species across the state. Pennsylvania was the first state to do this, and it was done really well. And so other states started looking to Pennsylvania and trying to do the same thing in their own atlases. And I've heard the way that other states doing atlases talk about Pennsylvania, and it's I knew that the second atlas was really well done, but I didn't know how what high regard it was in from other states until I started meeting these other coordinators and hearing what they had to say. And I think that's really exciting, especially heading into our third atlas now. And we want to kind of continue that tradition, see what more we can bring to this atlas, and just keep setting the bar higher and higher for our atlases. All right, here are, I'll just show you a few slides of things that we saw from the second atlas. So here we have Carolina wren, red-bellied woodpecker, 2 common species of Pennsylvania. Historically, these species were a little more southern species, and as they have spread, they've shown northern range expansions. So what these maps show you, each little kind of colored square that you can see, that represents one of those blocks in the state. So if it's colored in, it was detected during an atlas. If it's yellow, it was only detected in the first atlas, 1980s. If it's blue, it was only detected in the second atlas, 2000s. And if it's green, it was detected in both. So you can see, you know, more and more blue as you move north on these maps. So that's kind of indicating these northern expansions. You know, this is probably related to climate change, potentially increased use of bird feeders. And so it's going to be really interesting to see, like, the species showing these trends, how much that has increased, or maybe other species showing these trends. And now 20 years later, with, as we all know, like, even more issues with climate change. A couple more species, eastern meadowlark and merlin, showing very, very different maps here. So eastern meadowlark's kind of a typical grassland species, which unfortunately some of these grassland species haven't been doing very well in Pennsylvania, showing a lot of declines. Eastern meadowlark, we particularly see this in the southeast part of the state. So you can see increasing yellow there in that southeast corner. And then merlin is really interesting species. They were only first detected breeding in the state in 2006. So that was actually during that second breeding atlas. And at that time, there were only, I believe, 6 known nesting locations for merlin in the state. Now there are over 100. Merlin has, it seems like they have kind of adapted to urbanization a little more and nesting in more urban areas. So that's going to be really interesting to see, you know, see what we see now. Scarlet tanager, Pennsylvania is home to about 17% of the global population of scarlet tanager. So we have a really high stewardship responsibility for the future of this species. If you look at this top map, this is the kind of map you get if you just look at those distribution data alone. So that's where scarlet tanager was found in the second atlas across the state. That looks pretty good, found pretty much all over the state. Well, if you can incorporate the point count data, so abundance, you can get a map like the bottom one, sort of a heat map where it's darker, where there are more scarlet tanagers detected. And so this gives you a little more information. You know, it looks like they're found more on like these forested ridge tops, and you can start to see areas where maybe, you know, if we repeat this again, third atlas, you can start to see areas where maybe we're losing them. Maybe there's areas that they're doing well. We can learn things from that and take that into our habitat conservation or habitat management. Okay, let me explain this. So this graph uses breeding bird survey data, BBS route data, from 2004. And then you can use that and compare that to like the 2004, 2005 bird atlas data. And you can then take like more current BBS data and use that to predict what things will look like for the bird atlas next year, 2024. So this is representing those predictions. This is showing what we predict the 2024 populations to be as a percentage of the 2004 populations. So if 2024 population is 100% of 2004 population, that means it's stable. It hasn't increased, it hasn't decreased. So the tall yellow column in the middle, that's all the species that we're predicting, like, that are more or less staying stable or have stayed stable. The green columns to the right of that, those are species that are showing an increase because the 2024 population is larger, a larger percentage. And then unfortunately, we have those three sort of orange to red columns on the left. Those are species that we're predicting a decline for, or declines for. And if you know these species codes, you can see there are a lot of warblers there and a lot of our grassland birds. So that's, that's going to be really interesting and informative to see how these predictions match up with the data that we actually collect. I'm particularly interested in these, a couple of these species, yellow-billed cuckoo and black-billed cuckoo, with what's been going on with spongy moth caterpillars across the state the last few years. So, we're predicting declines, but I'm kind of curious to see like the next few years, if we do see some sort of little boom from them with having these caterpillars around the last few years. Okay, so I've had a few people ask me lately, why do we even need an atlas, or do we even need an atlas? Because we have eBird, we have BBS routes, we have Christmas bird counts, and people are right in a sense. Like we are getting a lot of great data from those surveys, and Pennsylvania has a huge number of eBird users. We're the 4th ranked state for total number of eBird checklists submitted. That's incredible. And we're getting a lot of data from that, but those data are missing some things that you have to do something like an atlas to capture. So I want to tell you a little bit more about those things. So first off, we're very biased in how we bird. We're biased spatially. So in this county map of Pennsylvania, the darker the county, the more eBird checklists have been submitted for that county. So Montgomery County has over 193,000 eBird checklists submitted, and poor Greene County only has 4,000. Greene County, you need more birders submitting eBird checklists. And you can see, particularly in the northern third of the state and some of those like central northern areas, those really light colored counties, we're lacking so much information for those counties. And that's particularly important for some species that, like we have some warbler species, for example, that we're sort of at the southern end of their breeding range. So they really just breed in Pennsylvania in those northern states. So we need more information for those species. We're also biased in the timing of when we go birding. So who loves to go birding in February when it's 10 degrees out and snowing? Maybe like, is that your favorite? No. Yeah. So that's not when we do most of our birding. We also don't even bird the most during the actual breeding season. We love to go birding during spring migration, right? And during fall migration. But we like the number of eBird checklists submitted in those in-between times falls way down. And then also we don't cover all species equally. We cover the things that are out during the day and the things that are really loud and singing a lot. We do much less nighttime birding, and we do much less birding for secretive marsh birds. And so the atlas makes an attempt to, or it gets us to cover the state and the species more equally. So we can get some of that information that we're missing. The other thing is that we miss a lot of breeding information. That knowledge is key. So phenology is changing. Phenology is the cyclical timing of things like breeding and migration that birds do on pretty much the same time scale from year to year. But sometimes, or, now some of those things are shifting with climate change. And we see evidence of this on small scales from studies here and there, but being able to look at that across the whole state and across all these species will be really, really important. We need to document breeding for conservation. So the way that our laws work for protecting birds, we don't protect birds because they exist in an area. We protect birds because they're breeding in this area, and they're breeding at this specific time period. So we need to know that they're breeding and know roughly when that time is to get that protection. And then it's also a really great opportunity to monitor certain species. So for example, Bald eagle and osprey were both listed species in Pennsylvania. At that time, they were monitored really closely. They've since been upgraded to recovered status, so they receive much less monitoring from the Game Commission. So the Atlas is a really great chance for us to get out there, see how they're doing, make sure that they're actually doing as well as we think and hope that they are. Here are just a few studies that talk about some of these drivers that I'm talking about, these drivers of population change in our birds in Pennsylvania. So this paper on the top left, Decline of the North American Avifauna, this came out a few years ago, and I'm sure you all have heard the numbers that this paper gave to us. This is the paper that told us that we've lost 30% of our birds, 3 billion birds, since 1970 in North America. And then the two papers below that talk about declines in aerial insectivores and grassland birds, two groups that are not doing very well overall in Pennsylvania. And then on the top right, this is a paper out of Powder Mill, a long-term banding station in Pennsylvania. This is one that found evidence of some of those changes in phenology. So when birds were breeding, changing in some species, but not, climate change doesn't seem to be affecting all species equally, and it's not affecting all species in ways that we would predict. So this is really important for us to get at more. And then the next paper down, West Nile virus. This is really devastating for our state bird, ruffed grouse, as well as other species in the state. And then the bottom one talks about some of the winter bird communities in North America, how they're moving around, they're wintering in different places due to effects of climate change. So these are all things that the Atlas will help give us more information to understand some of these things going on, and probably more evidence of some of them as well. All right, so this brings us to Pennsylvania's third bird atlas, starting in 2024, and it will go to early 2029. This logo was designed by two people, Dan Callahan and Bobby Brown. And of course, we have I think a beloved mascot with the logo here. What's this bird? It's a little weak. Okay, tufted titmouse. Thank you. So we thought that this was a really great species to have for the logo because it's a highly recognized species. It's really accessible. It's found in backyards and at bird feeders. So a lot of people, maybe even if people don't know the name of it, they probably recognize this species. It's sexually monomorphic, which means that males and females have the same plumage. That was important to us. It's also found in the state year-round, which was very important to us for this third atlas because we'll be doing winter surveys also. I'll talk more about that. And then tufted titmouse is also a species that's shown some of these interesting range changes that, that are interesting to see from the atlas data. So it kind of exemplifies why we do the atlas. Like the red-bellied woodpecker and the Carolina wren, it has shown those northern range expansions. And it's also a species highly affected by West Nile virus. So we've seen a lot of declines in tufted titmouse in the state in the last few years. All right, these are what I see as the four main objectives for the atlas. We'll start at the top left and work our way around. Top one is, of course, uniform coverage of the state. I already talked about why that's important, but we want to get out there to every single one of those blocks, get data for all those locations, try to cover habitats well, try to cover whole suite of species well. Next one, document all the breeding species in the state. We did this to the best of our knowledge in the second atlas, and we want to repeat that. That's like the main point of the atlas. And then again, we want not only distribution data, but also abundance data. So we want to do those point counts again, look at numbers of birds, not just where they're located. And then finally, the fourth one, this is the objective that I see really being for the people and the birders of Pennsylvania as well, not just for the birds. But we want this to be a really inclusive atlas, and we want to spread a lot of information. So we don't care if you've been birding for 30 years and you're an amazing birder, and you can identify all the species in the state, or if you're brand new to birding and you can identify the robin in your backyard, you're welcome to participate in the Atlas. You know, bring the knowledge that you have and share that with us, and I hope that will help you learn some more things along the way. Okay, so let's get back to talking about blocks again. This is just kind of, again, this is a lot of information. You don't need to memorize this. These sort of goals for blocks will be monitored by myself and by regional coordinators. So no one has to like keep track of this on their own, but just so you get a sense of what we're looking for in these blocks. So, and I want to add, so people can sign up to cover a block. They'll be called the principal atlaser. If you do that, that means that you are saying, I'm going to take responsibility for this block and try to see it through all of these goals, make sure we reach these across the 5 years of the Atlas. So you don't have to complete this in 1 year. That's for the really, you know, dedicated birders who have a lot of time to commit. You do not need to sign up for a block. You can go birding anywhere. Even if you sign up for a block, you can bird there and go birding wherever else you want to. So I just want to make that clear. But what we're looking for and really focusing on is trying to reach these goals for each block. So we want the block to be visited 3+ times of the year. This is during the breeding Atlas. And we want all major habitats visited so people can study maps and, you know, look at where we haven't been to yet and try to hit up this little wetland here, this grassland here. We're looking at 20+ hours of daytime birding and 2+ hours of nighttime birding. And we're going to work on ways to get people comfortable doing nighttime birding, hopefully get some people out in groups. So we, you know, people who aren't comfortable doing that on their own, we're going to try to make that possible. And then the species goals, we're looking to have 55 to 95 or more species reported for each block. This is so variable because of course it depends on where the block is in the state. If it's in downtown Philadelphia or if it's in somewhere with more natural habitat, of course you're going to have a lot more species expected. And this is kind of, we developed this with our species list from previous atlases. And then we want at least 50% of those detected species in a block to reach that confirmed breeding status. So you've actually found a nest or you've found some other like really high evidence of breeding. If you are one of those principal atlasers, so someone who's signed up for a block, you'll periodically get this kind of progress report. This is an example from the Maryland DC Atlas, which is getting ready to start their final year of their atlas. And so you've got a map of your block. You can see all the little circles are spots that you've gone and birded there or where someone has birded. Over on the right side, you can see, you know, the number of species that you have in the different breeding status categories, possible, probable, confirmed. And then you can also see the species that were reported in previous atlas that you have not, or that have not been reported for the block yet. So that can help you set some goals and decide what to go looking for. So you want to try to detect those species or at least put in good effort to determine if they're not there anymore. Okay, so let's get into what's new for the third atlas. I think the first one is the most exciting. So we'll be using eBird to enter our observations. And so eBird has developed this kind of atlas portal that states can use for their atlases. Wisconsin was the first state to do this in 2015, and a bunch of states have done it since then, and other countries as well. Some of the benefits of this are that eBird is familiar to many birders, and when you go to use the Atlas portal, it will look almost identical to just regular eBird data entry. So hopefully the learning curve, at least for people who have already been using eBird, hopefully the learning curve won't be too steep. eBird, of course, records some of the data that we need automatically, which is great. You don't have to think about it as much, and you don't have to worry about writing down the wrong date or whatever. So it records your location, date and time, the distance that you travel. So that's very convenient. And then, if you use eBird now, you know how nice it is to get on there and check. You can see what your buddy who went birding at this spot you want to go to, what they reported from there yesterday. We get these very fast updates. The Atlas works in much the same way, so you can check how blocks are doing. And I'll show some more slides on that. So it's going to be so convenient for helping us figure out where to go birding and where to set your sites. And then finally, the block boundaries are really clear in eBird. And in previous atlases, you just had to go out with a paper map and try to make sure that you were in your block, because the key thing here is making sure your checklist is all contained within one block. So if you're doing this in eBird, this middle photo here, or this middle screenshot, you can actually see the block boundary. And then on the right side here, this is what your checklist looks like. It looks exactly like just regular birding in eBird, but you get this, see that red bar at the top, you get this alert that pops up and it tells you you're outside of your block. So you either need to hightail it back into your block or you need to stop, and then you can start a new checklist if you're going to continue birding in that direction. And then on the left side here, these are those codes that you use to help determine the breeding status. So the ones selected here, P, parent suitable habitat, there's everything from like carrying nest material, building nest, nest with young, nest with eggs, so on and so forth. These are in eBird now. You can use these now. I'm sure some of you have. A lot of people don't. I think they're either not taking the time or they don't know how to correctly use them. So we'll be teaching you how to correctly use those, because that's like key to doing the Atlas. And then I do want to mention, in case you are not a mobile eBird user, but you do use eBird on your desktop computer at home or whatever, we will have paper data sheets that you can print off and go ahead and do it the old-fashioned way. And then when you get home, you can enter that. And if you don't use eBird at all, don't use a computer, we do have significant populations of Amish birders in the state. We want to make sure that they and anyone else who doesn't use a computer or eBird can still participate. So we will have an avenue of getting their paper data sheets to the coordinator, and so the data can still be entered. But we are encouraging, if at all possible, if you can use eBird and enter the data yourself, that is the most helpful. And it also makes sure that we're not, misreading your messy handwriting and that sort of thing. All right, so these are some more examples from the Maryland DC Atlas. You can see in this map here, the state, and all these little blocks are their Atlas blocks. And you can, so you can go into eBird and select these different metrics to look at. So sort of that like blue bar up at the top says Atlas effort. You can select diurnal or daytime hours. You can select nighttime hours. You can select number of species, some different things. And then the blocks pop up color coded so you can see how they're doing. So here, this is daytime hours. So all of these blocks that are sort of black colored that's saying that those blocks have enough daytime hours. They're 20 plus hours. That doesn't mean that you can't still go birding there and submit your observations. You can, but if you are able to go to this block over here that is lacking those hours, you might choose to go do that if that's possible. And then you can, click on a block, and then you get this like little pop-up, like this one for this block is called Washington East to Northeast. And you get this little summary of, this is how many daytime hours, nighttime hours, so on and so forth. So just a closer look at that information. You can also select for a county. So this is Prince George's County. And if you scroll down here, you would see all 53 of the blocks in the county. And then again, just get real quick look at all of those sort of metrics for those blocks. You can also search by species. So here, this is Louisiana water thrush, and you can see the blocks that it's found in. And then this also shows you those breeding status codes. So the kind of like reddish orangish ones that's the blocks where the species has been confirmed breeding in. So you might use this to look at, this block over here it's been found in, but it's not confirmed. So maybe I want to go look for Louisiana water thrushes there. So just like lots of cool ways to look at the data for fun to see what's going on and what people are seeing. But also if you have the capability to dictate where you go birding a little bit and be flexible in that way, then you can use this to help you be a really effective birder in terms of like helping reach the goals of the atlas. Okay, I'm just going to talk really quickly about point counts. So like I said, there were over 34,000 point counts done by trained surveyors in the second atlas. We're planning to repeat that again, but we also want to do additional point counts done by volunteer birders. This is not an expectation of everyone, so don't panic. This is for like the really experienced birders that can more or less ID all species and have the ability to do this. In each block, we're looking to have 4 additional point counts done. This is really great because if we can do this in most blocks across the state, this will add over 19,000 additional points. So that will be added to those other point counts. And that will help us get even better estimates of abundance. And another really nice thing about this is that these will be more off-road point counts. And so that will help us make sure that our roadside point counts aren't biased. Like we're not biasing what species we're detecting since they're alongside roads. All right, and then the last kind of new thing for the third atlas is that we'll be doing a winter atlas. So you may have noticed that at the beginning, I didn't call this the Pennsylvania Breeding Bird Atlas. I called it the Pennsylvania Atlas. And I talk a little bit about the Breeding Bird Atlas and the Winter Atlas, but collectively we're just calling it the Atlas. So the Winter Atlas will be just done in regular eBird. So just the way you eBird now, you can enter the data that way. The Winter Atlas is really important because much like I talked about before, we're missing data for species all over the state during the winter. So this is yellow-bellied sapsucker. These blue pins are eBird observations for several winters. And if you look closely at this, you'd say, oh, wow, like all of the sapsuckers are hanging out in like Philadelphia or Southeast Pennsylvania and around State College. We know that's not where most of the sapsuckers are in the winter. We just don't have people up in northern PA birding in the winter where a lot of the sapsuckers are. So I think we're going to get some really neat information from the Winter Atlas. The way the Winter Atlas works is, so across the state, all the blocks are lumped into groups of 6, kind of like this example here. The lower right block is called the priority block. So about 1/6 of the blocks across the state are priority blocks. For the Winter Atlas, we will focus on covering priority blocks. You can still do winter atlasing in any of the other blocks, but those are the ones that we really want to make sure we cover adequately. So these will be 1-hour counts, and we have the Winter Atlas takes place in December, January, and February, and we have that time period split into 2, an early winter period and a late winter period. So we're looking to do 3+ counts in early and 3+ counts in late winter. Again, try to visit all habitats in the blocks, enter data into eBird, and then we can, we'll be able to probably sort of mine eBird for other data. It doesn't necessarily have to be people specifically like out winter atlasing, but we should be able to kind of collectively use all of that data. Again, as long as it takes place in one block. All right, just a little bit about the organization of the Atlas real quick. So really the backbone of this huge endeavor is the volunteer birders and people that will be signing up to be principal atlasers for these blocks. It isn't possible without so many people helping out. And then there will be a coordinator in each county, and then the state is split up into these 8 regions that you see here. We are working on getting all of our regional coordinators in place and our county coordinators as well. We have most of the regional coordinators in place at this time, but we are still looking for regional coordinators for Southeast and Northeast, I know. You do also have the option of co-coordinating. And so if anyone out there listening is interested in this, please get a hold of me and I can share more information about it. But I think we have a really good system in place for kind of we'll be getting all these people to work together. And I talked about wanting to do these in-person birding events and educational opportunities to make sure everyone kind of knows what they're doing and feels comfortable going out and atlasing. So we're really going to be relying on these regional and county level coordinators to help with a lot of that. Okay, real quick, the Atlas of Life is another citizen science or community science project that will be going on at the same time as the Bird Atlas. It's not run by the Bird Atlas, but it's just another cool opportunity that if you want to participate in, you can. You don't have to again. But so these maps here are iNaturalist data, and you can see, so we have plants, fungi, and arachnids moving from left to right. So you can see on these maps all these like white areas where, again, just like with bird data, we have areas that we're missing data around the state just because we don't have as many people going to those spots and recording iNaturalist recording observations in iNaturalist for any other kind of living creature. And so iNaturalist will have an Atlas of Life portal. It'll work much the same way as our eBird Atlas portal. So you'll be able to go enter things that you see if you're out there and you're already going to be paying attention to other things. If you just want to go out there and look at birds and not look at anything else, that's totally fine as well. Here's a timeline of what we're looking at. So that Atlas of Life iNaturalist portal, that will be open year round for all 5 years. The breeding bird portal will be open year round because we do have a few species that can breed year round, or that do breed year round in the state. The key months for the breeding atlas will be kind of March to August, roughly. That's when the bulk of our species will be breeding or taking care of their young. And then the point counts will primarily be done in June. That's both the professional point counts and those volunteer point counts. And then the winter atlas, as I said, will take place December, January, and February. So the first winter atlas won't be starting until next winter, end of 2024. And then we'll be wrapping things up with that 5th winter atlas in 2028, 2029. So how can you participate? First thing, so if you don't already use eBird, but you're interested, I'd encourage you to go ahead and sign up and get an eBird account and start using it, start getting familiar with it. And then consider signing up for a block if you're someone who has more time to bird and you think that's something that you want to take on. And then, once the atlas starts in 2024, get out there, go birding. For the breeding atlas, focus on breeding behaviors. If you're able to, try to go bird in uncompleted blocks, focus on species that aren't reported yet or species that we can upgrade. Make sure that you're using the handbook and these eBird tools for knowing that you're correctly doing things, and then consider nocturnal birding. And then finally, make sure that you are using that eBird Atlas portal. What this means, the Atlas portal is basically you'll get on eBird and then there'll just be like a little thing that you can click to enter the portal. You're still in eBird. Anything that you enter, all those checklists will still go into regular eBird. They'll, all your summary stuff, like your total number of checklists, it'll be added to that. If you happen to get a new lifer, that will still be added to your life list. If you get a new species for a county, that will still show up. All the Atlas portal does is put sort of a label on those checklists saying like this was done specifically for the Atlas. So when we go to pull all that data, that's easy for us to do. If you happen to forget to do that, like to go do it in the portal, you can go back and fix it later. So it's fine. And we'll have instructions on how to do all that. And then, like make sure you're focusing on those breeding behaviors. I need to give a shout out to the groups involved in this huge effort. The bulk of the funding is coming from the Game Commission. And then Hawk Mountain is sort of the home of this 3rd Atlas. I'm working for Hawk Mountain, and we're getting a ton of support from them. And then we have so much help coming from Pennsylvania Audubon Council, PSO. eBird, of course, has developed the portal for us to use and is offering a lot of support. So I hope that we see you all out there birding and participating in the Atlas in whatever capacity you are able to, starting next year. We're on social media. We're really just getting things going now. So we don't have, you know, the eBird portal is not up yet. We'll have a web page, an eBird web page that's going to have all the information linked to it, maps and instructions and YouTube videos and all sorts of things. But for now, I'd say the best place to find information is to follow us on Facebook or Instagram at PA Bird Atlas. We're also on Twitter, X. You can get a hold of me at pabirdatlas@hawkmountain.org. Please do let me know if you have any interest in the county or regional coordination, and I can see, you know, I'll get you more information and we'll see if there's a spot available. And then we do have a web page up on the Game Commission website. So if you just Google Game Commission Bird Atlas, you'll come to it and it has a little more information on there. All right, I'd be happy to take any questions now.
Great. We'll take questions from the hall. We also have some on chat. We have at least 25 or 26 people that are listening remotely. So why don't we take one from the hall first, and remember, and then we'll make one call to you.
You may have defined this, but you define the count, the bird count that you're referring to. The point count.
Define the point count. So just explain
Yeah.
that again for the volunteer point counts.
Yeah.
Okay, so the volunteer point counts will just basically, if you're signed up to do that, you will receive some points, 4 different points in a block. You want to try to get to those points if possible. We'll have, you know, like more information on this. There's basically a buffer area. You want to try to definitely get in that area, get as close to the point as possible. If you can't get exactly to it, that's okay. You'll get to that point and then you'll have a set period of time, I think 6 minutes. So you'll just stand in one spot for 6 minutes and record the birds that you're detecting. And that's more or less it. There might be a small amount of additional information, but that's the basics of it. Yeah, and that's for counts over all 5 years. So you're not having to repeat those every year.
So a specific location.
It's a specific location. We want to try to get as close to that point as possible. Because if you start doing them in different places, you can end up getting too close. You know, maybe these 2 counts end up being this far apart instead. And then you lose your assumption that the birds that you heard here are different from the birds you heard over here. So they have to be a certain distance apart. And we also want to make sure that they're in the habitat that we were selecting them to be in. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Amber, we have a question from Chris Lundberg. He's asking, how will blocks be distributed among principal observers? Is it first come, first serve, or will the county coordinators assign blocks?
I think it will basically be first come, first serve, at least initially. And I have had people ask if they can sign up for blocks that they had in the previous Atlas, and you definitely can. We're working right now on getting those block maps up, and we will have a map on the website that will show which blocks have been signed up for already. And my suggestion is just as soon as we have like the list of blocks out, you go ahead and get a hold of your county coordinator or regional coordinator, or me if you don't yet know how to get a hold of them, and say, this is the one that I want to sign up for. And yeah, and then eventually I think we'll be kind of probably asking people to cover blocks that haven't been covered yet. The blocks will have different names this time because eBird has their own naming system. But otherwise they'll be exactly the same, and we'll have them, like when you look online, look at these maps, we'll have it so that you can see both names. So if you know a block from before by a name, you'll be able to find that one still.
That's good. Question from the room?
What would be the best place to see a ruffed grouse in southeastern Pennsylvania?
The question is, what's the best place to see a ruffed grouse in southeastern Pennsylvania? And I actually am not very familiar with southeastern Pennsylvania, so I'm unfortunately not the person. Well, I just started working for Hawk Mountain 2 months ago, and I work remotely. I live in State College. So I can tell you where to see a rough grass around State College. What was that?
I said late.
Yeah,
Let me know where I see a rough grass.
I think
I've
other
never
people in the audience here would have much better intel on that.
I will tell you that, I shared this with Amber when I was, when I first moved to Glenside and I was 6 years old. In the Edge Hill Woods, which is not far from Briarbush, rough grouse nested. We had rough grouse on the nest. They are expatriated from Montgomery County.
Oh, the times have changed.
Yeah, that's it. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but you can figure that out. But it was a while ago. But yeah. I'd also tell you, if you backpack like the old loggers path in North Central PA, my backpacking days are long over. But rough grouse and young rough grouse are definitely there.
Okay.
Question, have Bob Ross asked, have safe dates gone by the wayside?
That's a great question. So just for everyone, if you don't know what safe dates are basically kind of a period of time that we try to guide you into looking for species during the breeding bird atlas. It's not just when they're breeding, but it's when you're least likely to encounter migrants as well. So the idea is that if you find that species singing during their safe dates, we can say with pretty high certainty that they're breeding, they're not a migrant. Now, if you find really clear evidence of breeding, if you find a nest or something like that, you can record, that's obviously confirmed whether you're in safe dates or not. So this is really just those for those lower levels of evidence of breeding. Safe dates have not gone by the wayside. We're still at this time trying to figure out how to maybe make them a little more simplified and easier for all the volunteer birders to digest, because it's 2 dates for every single species. It's a lot to remember, and a lot to look, it's just it's confusing. So we're working on it. It is really important because if you don't have safe dates, you end up with all these observations coming in that you then have to go through and try to suss out, what we decide is breeding and what is not. So they have to be applied at one point or another, either for the birders or afterwards. So they'll be coming out. There will be safe dates. Hopefully it will be digestible.
Any questions, other questions from the room? Marlene?
Oh, yeah.
That's actually here. Somebody else asked that.
I can't believe that I forgot to mention that. The question was, how big is a block? Blocks are about 3.5 by 3.5 miles. So they're a little under 10 square miles.
I have a question. We participate in something called Climate Watch of the National Audubon Society. There are 10-kilometer blocks. We do 12-point counts in each blocks. We have 30-some volunteers that cover multiple blocks, all of the Philadelphia blocks and many of the blocks in Montgomery County. And that is done in the winter between January 15th and February 15th, and in the summer between May 15th and June 15th. That's data is in eBird. Can that be incorporated into this project?
I think we could. The big thing is, and I'm sorry, I might have missed if you said this, but so the checklists they have to fall within one block.
Yeah, that's what we'd have to find out, whether or not the Climate Watch squares, as they're called, are the same, or are they within blocks? They're 10-kilometer blocks, I believe. With the
so
do you know that, Christy? Is it 10-kilometer blocks offhand?
So that would be a little different size.
Yeah.
If there would be a way to enter the data to make sure it was only in one block, it certainly would work for the winter atlas. We'd have to talk a little bit more about the breeding stuff to make sure that matched up enough.
We can talk further about that.
Yeah, I think there's at least an opportunity to have some of it work out.
Good. Any other questions? All right, online. Will acoustic, this is from Holger. with DVOC, will acoustic monitoring, e.g. owls, marsh birds, be allowed under the Atlas protocol?
We will have some special protocols for things like marsh birds and whippoorwills and owls, and that's probably going to be taking place for marsh birds. I don't yet know if that's going to be specific personnel or if that will be available to everyone.
Okay, one other question online, I think this is the last one. Which are some of the species that breed all year long in the state? I'm not sure are there species that breed all year long?
Well, so I might have worded that a little bit incorrectly when I said that during the talk. We have species breeding in every month of the state, or every month of the year across the state. I think probably the only species that maybe really breeds in every month in Pennsylvania would be rock pigeon, but we have species that are breeding during winter: bald eagles, great horned owls. They're building their nests in December, and on eggs in February or whatever, January, February. So that is why the breeding atlas will be open all year.
Why don't we make that the last question?
Okay.
And if people have some time afterwards, I believe there's still some delicious cookies and pastries and coffee in the back. We have time to consume that. I do want to make a few announcements first, but let's stop the recording. Are you able to do that, Tracy? And thank you, Amber.
Thank you.